big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
One preseason game in the books, 2 more to go. I'm usually used to saying 3 more to go, but it's been a couple of years since the NFL's gone to 3 preseason games, which means that there's a lot of things to discuss over the next 30 or so minutes here. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. Usayd, Koshul, Steve, Letizia here. Check us out on Twitter, guys, at Usayd, Koshul, at CFC Bears, and at Halas Beat. Steve, I don't know about you, it was kind of weird having the Bears playing on Sunday afternoon for the first time in forever, honestly. It's also a little bit weird because, the preseason game, we expected to see all these starters. That's something that clearly did not happen because Caleb Williams and, more so Ben Johnson deciding to hold people out. Don't know what week 2 is going to hold, but I guess week 1 brought a lot of very interesting talking points based on what side of Bears Twitter you're on, whether you're a fan, a content creator, a journalist like you and I very much are, and I guess everything in between.
Yeah, it's always fun when Bears football is back. I did the same thing that I do every year, which is get really, really pumped up for the preseason game and then turn on the TV and you see Tyson Bagent roll out there and you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be pretty boring. But it's still fun to actually talk about the actual game itself rather than talking about practices. So it was definitely interesting. There's a lot of good, a lot of bad kind of mixed in there. So it'll definitely be an interesting discussion today.
Yeah, so first off, I don't know if you saw, I forgot who it was, and I'm terrible at remembering this type of stuff, but someone was like, well, the one positive from the Matt Eberflus era was that he finally got the grass figured out at Soldier Field, because there's been this thing where it's like every time there's a big gap between the Bears playing games at Soldier Field, the grass just really tends to suck. But the Bermuda grass really looked nice. But overall, though, I would say if you're a team like the Bears right now, which is the construction of the roster is what I'm talking about here, you know who your starters are for the most part. You are looking to see which depth pieces and which sort of younger guys are going to go and step up. That is why this preseason is so important, because we know Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze and Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, they're all locks to make this roster. What we don't know is, who are some of the guys behind them that are going to go and step up? I thought this game against Miami, irrespective of what the Dolphins beat is saying, which Omar Kelly's still not over it, by the way, according to what I saw today on Twitter. But this was a pretty good game to evaluate where the Bears' 2s, 3s, and 4s are ultimately at, because we saw guys that, normally fade into oblivion make plays in this game.
Yeah, kind of, like I said, there's a lot of guys who kind of stood out, and it's like you said, the starters didn't play, and we kind of know who the starters are, but there's always going to be injuries, over the course of the year. There are positions where you just want to have a good rotation, like on defensive line, and a lot of guys stood out. It's probably beating a dead horse at this point if you're on Twitter, but Austin Booker had an incredible game, and he kind of picked up where he left off last preseason. With his play, and I think last preseason, he had a bunch of sacks, but some of them were kind of just like effort sacks, kind of just not quick wins. But the sacks he had on Sunday were at least 2 of the 3 were quick wins that will translate to the regular season, and the third one was a pretty good one too. So, I think he's really the main talking point out of this game. And we've talked about Austin Booker, I think probably on every episode so far we've done this offseason, just how important it is for him to kind of step up and take over that third pass rusher role. And even though he was the kind of the 4th pass rusher in the game this week, I think he is kind of setting the tone early on to be that third pass rusher when the season actually starts.
Yeah, Austin Booker aside, and we'll circle back to him later on. See, usually when I watch these preseason games, one of my biggest takeaways is that usually by middle of the second quarter, I'm kind of tuned out, depending on if I'm at the game or if I'm at home. But what ends up happening, I think, is it's like when we see some of these second, third, fourth string guys go in, the game suddenly gets boring. It seems like I'm ready to fall asleep. The interesting part about this second, third, and fourth string in relation to this entire coaching staff is the fact that you were basically talking about the pace of play would normally have been slower, but everybody was going full speed, which to me really speaks volumes to when we hear all these reports coming out of Halas Hall during training camp. When we see our guy Zach in his daily notebook talk about, well, the offense is going really hard, the defense is going really hard. Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze is making plays. You've got Jaquan Brisker suddenly fired up. That is not just the guys that are the big fish in the room. It's pretty much everyone else that is suddenly buying into this philosophy too, which really I think makes me think that this staff has sent a message loud and clear, which is pretty much, oh, we're going to get after you guys. And if you don't buy into what we're doing here, then you're not going to have a roster spot here.
Yeah, I think the competition level that we've heard about in the training camp practices really kind of boiled over into the game because we were kind of talking about before this. We didn't have too many guys. We were trying to come up with guys who impressed versus guys who disappointed, and I couldn't really think of many guys who really truly disappointed because I think everyone played pretty well to an extent. So it's good to see that level of play kind of boil over from the practices into the game. But yeah, a lot of guys played really well. I think Noah Sewell made some plays out there. Terrell Smith made plays. Those are guys who are pretty far down Noah Sewell might end up being the starter, but Terrell Smith is probably your fourth, fifth cornerback, and he's coming out here making plays. He's looking really good. So it's really nice to see those bottom of the barrel guys, bottom of the roster guys, really kind of separating themselves out, because that's really what this preseason and training camp is for. Is you know who your starters are, you have a pretty good idea who your first guys off the bench are going to be, who is going to be the roster from 40 to 53. Those guys are who really can make a name for themselves, and there's a lot of guys who kind of stood out.
Well, I mean, the other thing is this, and you make a really good point about bringing this up on the topic of linebacker 3. I feel like people should be giving Ruben Hippolyte a lot more credit for the way that he performed on Sunday afternoon. And the reason being is because, all offseason, all we heard from the time the Bears hired Dennis Allen all the way down to the preseason game was, well, it's Noah Sewell. Dennis Allen's a mastermind when it comes to his linebackers. Dennis Allen's going to be really good for Noah Sewell. Then you take Ruben Hippolyte, and the Bears all of a sudden, like I said, someone said that they had plans to put Ruben Hippolyte at running back, which, I mean, it's pretty comical to me because his body's not built like a running back. But then, in comes, I remember Bears director of college scouting, Francis St. Paul, telling us that one of the reasons the Bears liked Ruben Hippolyte so much is because he started, I think it was 50-something games in the Big Ten, which obviously when you consider the extra year that guys are allowed to have now, especially because of COVID, and again, we're finally kind of getting out of that now. But then you also consider the fact that it's Maryland has a reputation as a program that is never going to be this elite, top tier, best of the best Big Ten program, but they do send respectable talent to the league. And I think, that showed on Sunday afternoon with Ruben Hippolyte. So as much as I think people want to say, well, Ruben Hippolyte, we're just going to write him off, there's warrant to, if he can build on it, then all of a sudden the Bears have a more complicated decision on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, not only does Maryland send, a couple guys to the NFL every year, but I mean, they're still in the Big Ten. They're playing Ohio State. They're playing Oregon. They're playing USC, every year. They're playing. So a guy who has 50 starts in that conference is playing against guys who are going to be a lot of guys who are playing in the NFL in a few years. So that experience is huge for a rookie. And I think Ruben Hippolyte played pretty well. There's things that he needs to improve on for sure, but for a rookie, fourth or fifth round pick, whatever he was, is playing in his first career game. He was playing fast. He was playing instinctive. This might sound dumb, counterintuitive, but he wasn't thinking too much. Sometimes, you a linebacker, you're thinking a little bit too much and you get caught kind of, thinking instead of reacting to the football. He was just flying downhill and he made a few plays. he got caught on a few blocks that he, struggled to get off of. That's kind of his game. He's not going to be a guy who's going to be shedding a lot of blocks, but if he can just play fast and play downhill and use that 4.4 speed, then I think he has a future in the NFL. And yeah, I agree. Everyone kind of wrote him off, myself included. But I think it was an encouraging first sign. Still a lot of stuff to work on, but definitely an encouraging first start for him. Definitely going to be watching him these next couple games as well.
Getting away from some of the general thoughts, takeaways, impressions, there's this, I guess, burning question here. And again, I hope you guys are watching this on YouTube because I'm going to use my hands to illustrate this. We went in the offseason with, it was Braxton Jones and Ozzy Trapilo here and here. And it was Braxton. Then it was Ozzy. Then it was Braxton. Then it was Ozzy. Now it kind of seems like, is the pendulum swinging, even though my hands are not a pendulum, is the pendulum swinging in Ozzy Trapilo's favor? Where Braxton Jones is going down here? Or is this sort of these guys are still neck and neck? We're going to agree with what the Bears are saying, which is we're going to let this whole thing play out still.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still neck and neck. I don't think either of them did anything either positively or negatively in this game to kind of separate themselves. I mean, obviously Braxton Jones got the start. So I don't take, maybe you could read into that. Maybe you don't want to read into that. But the guys who usually start the preseason games have a leg up there. He also obviously has the experience that Ozzy Trapilo did. But again, going back to kind of how they played, I was watching the All-22 today. I don't think either of them really played that well. But I don't think either of them really played that poorly. Braxton Jones had that one big pressure allowed that looked, he let a guy in on his inside shoulder pretty much unblocked, which was an awful rep. But besides that, he actually, there weren't any other reps that were really that bad. Ozzy Trapilo didn't really have any glaringly bad reps, but he also was kind of just doing the same thing he did in college, which was, play way too upright, doesn't play with good knee bend. And I think that's just something that he's going to have to deal with because he's a 6'8" offensive lineman. Those 6'8" offensive linemen usually play with a narrower base, struggle to play with good knee bend, and it's just a part of who they are as a physical person. It's difficult to correct that when you just are so tall. So, like I said, I don't think he had any glaring weaknesses. Maybe one loss, but he didn't really do anything to that great either. So between those two guys, I still think it's a toss-up. If I had to guess today, I still think it's Braxton Jones' job to lose. Braxton Jones did have that one bad rep, but he is coming back off an injury. He has the starting experience. I think it's going to be him at the end of the day, unless Ozzy Trapilo shows a lot more over the next couple games.
Well, you're probably not going to be too happy to read my 5 players to watch in week 2 article that is dropping this Friday, the 15th at 8 a.m. But see, there's a couple coaching points here. So there's there's a technique to how you play offensive line. Okay. Now, what the Bears love to do is they love to draft these offensive linemen that can play all over the place pretty much. Okay. That's why Braxton Jones was playing guard in college, right guard, right tackle in college before the Bears moved him over to the left side. And so they want these guys that are sort of these versatile Swiss Army types. It's a big reason as to why, Darnell Wright's played pretty much every position but center, I believe, at Tennessee. And then Karan Amagaji, even though he played tackle primarily at Yale, he was also playing guard for some time there as well. Now, the big sort of thing to really keep in mind here is this. So as an offensive lineman, it's harder for some of these taller guys to play low. There's a saying amongst the football community, which is the low man wins in the trenches, which is pretty much if you're willing to stay low, you got a good base. If your feet keep moving, then you're probably going to have a good chance at winning the rep. You also got to be powerful and punch the guy's chest, okay? But as a general rule, people tell you offensive line is all about hand placement and your pass sets and your run blocking. Yes, it is. But as the game's adapted and as the game's evolved, what's ended up happening is at the high school and college levels, these offensive linemen are being asked to do a little bit more and a little bit more, making them more versatile. So, as an offensive lineman, if you stop moving your feet and you get cold feet, then you've pretty much lost the rep. That's as a general rule. So I think, in Braxton Jones' case, the one whiff he had, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he just stood straight and stopped moving his feet. I haven't watched the All-22 yet. Whereas with Ozzy Trapilo, you're getting a player that's played every single position. and admitted that he's trained to play every single position because he's like, I don't know what's going to happen at the NFL level with me. And so with Ozzy, there's a lot more technique and refinement to go off of. So I think, when we go back to this whole conversation of like, is it Braxton or Ozzy Trapilo? I think the reality of it is it's just like, what are the Bears' value in what they want their left tackle to be beyond just a stud pass protector? Because right now I'd say mentally, because of his experience and what to expect, Braxton Jones is much farther ahead of Ozzy Trapilo. That's not me writing Ozzy Trapilo off, but I think that there's some mental growth that has to occur for Ozzy, which, again, is only going to come with time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. You kind of hit the nail on the head, but I think some of the things I saw with Ozzy Trapilo on my rewatch today was exactly what you were saying, was stopping your feet and, playing high, narrow base. It's stuff that I don't know how correctable it is just because he is so tall. It's just difficult for guys who are 6'8" to play with good knee bend and play with good balance like that. So I think I'm not writing, like you said, I'm not writing him off at all. I would say if there's one player I'm disappointed in, it would be him, only because I had really high expectations for him going into this game. Like I put out on Twitter a video of Theo Benedict playing, and I thought he played pretty well, but I also had a lot lower expectations for Theo Benedict than I did for Ozzy Trapilo, who was a second round pick. So it's just in regards to who's winning this battle, I think it's still very much a toss up. I don't think we can make any distinctions here right now, because neither I want to see what I want to see for next week is I want to see Ozzy Trapilo get the start and see him against some better competition, because by the time Ozzy Trapilo got into the game, he was going up against, I think, third stringers at that point, or at least second stringers, and then into third stringers as he played. So I want to see how he performs, against some better competition, maybe in week 2. I also maybe want to see a little bit more. Leave him on maybe on an island a little bit more, just to kind of see what he has, because they had a lot of tight ends next to him, in this game, chips from running backs to kind of help him out. I want to see kind of how he does, kind of throw him into the fire and see how he responds, because I still have questions if he can really be that lockdown left tackle that we need. And he doesn't have to be that lockdown left tackle week 1 of his rookie year, but can he get there eventually? Because I think that's what the argument is. Braxton Jones, I think, gives you a higher floor this year because you kind of just know what you're getting. But if you think Ozzy Trapilo is going to be better in the long run, you might be willing to take a little bit of a downgrade early on, expecting him to kind of get better as the course of the year goes.
Yeah, that is a really good point there. You're not... See, it's tough because it's like when we talk about this whole idea of Ozzy Trapilo versus Braxton Jones, and this is, I think, a really good time to mention, it seems to me as if Kieran Amagaji, based off the first string, the initial depth chart that Bears PR compiled last week, not the coaching staff, PR's predictions, though, is that it seems like Kieran is squarely out of this battle at this point, and the Bears are more content with trying him on the right side. That's, again, when we get another depth chart later this week, we'll discuss that in Thursday's episode. But the other, I guess, part to this whole thing is the fact that it's like, if you're the Bears and you're Ryan Poles right now, and you're Ben Johnson, you took Ozzy Trapilo with the intention of hoping that, he can eventually develop into something, because this rookie class for the Bears that's kind of impressing a lot of people right now, the big thing is that it's like they didn't want to just take another player at 56 overall and then be like, yeah, well, we'll figure out left tackle next year. Like, this is, I think, really smart on the Bears' part, because it's like, if you don't, let's just say Braxton Jones doesn't resign next year, then what you're doing is you're basically hoping that Ozzy Trapilo has enough experience to give him a shot at the starting job, instead of hoping that, next year's left tackle class is going to be really good, because you don't want to bank on, next year's class being really good. So it's sort of a thing, right, where the Bears are trying to do everything they can to figure out what works versus what doesn't work. But On another note completely, we've mentioned plenty of Braxton Jones and Ozzie Trapilo. I feel like a couple other players that deserve some praise, but then also guys that, maybe didn't stand out as much. I mean, I guess I'll get it kicked off with the bad news here. I got a issue with Zach Pickens, dude, because we're at a point now where it's like I mentioned a moment ago. The Bears are now drafting players despite having talent at positions. They're still drafting players at those respective positions, right? You signed Grady Jarrett this offseason. You have Javon Dexter. You're getting Andrew Billings back. Well, you still go ahead and you take Shamar Turner, okay? Zach Pickens, to me, though, for all the hype that was sort of around him, the Bears met with him at the Combine a couple of years ago. They made him the first pick of the third round. He really has never accomplished anything significant. I believe it was like 3 tackles and I think a sack or something in Sunday's preseason contest, but I still think he's a disappointment because you need more out of that position. And ultimately, when Billings was out last year, the expectation was that Zach Pickens would step up, but this preseason game showed me that his development is stagnant and he's probably on the roster bubble at this point.
Yeah, Pickens is. I thought he played fine. Like he didn't do anything special. That's for certain. And when you're is this his third year now? Third year, I believe, going into it. We need to see you're going up against second and third stringers. You need to kind of show that you're a head and shoulders above them. And he kind of just seemed like he was on par with all of them. So I would agree. He was definitely a disappointment. I think he is squarely on the roster bubble. I think Chris Williams played a little bit better than him, the other D tackle next to him. So I think he probably is on the roster bubble, trending on the way out. If we're talking about disappointments, I did think of one, and I want to stay with me on this because I'm going to say his name, and you're going to be like, he was not a disappointment, but Kyle Monangai. This is why he was a disappointment. As a runner, I thought he looked really good. I liked what he did as a runner, so that he was not disappointed at all as a runner of the football, which is what he gets paid to do. My issue with him in this game was more on the pass blocking side. He had a couple really rough pass blocking reps. One of them ended up with a sack. And if you're a rookie running back, especially a 7th round pick rookie running back, and you have to be able to pass block to see the field early on in your career. So that might be something that kind of keeps him back. Now, I will say I thought he was a good pass blocker in college, and that usually does translate. So I'm hoping this was just a kind of a blip on the radar, and he gets back kind of a welcome to the NFL moment when he first tried to block maybe a defensive lineman. And then hopefully next week, he gets a little bit better in the guard. But that's something I'm watching. But I do agree with you, Zach Pickens firmly on the roster bubble.
Okay, Monangai is an interesting one because I'm split on Monangai. First off, full disclosure here, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, the whole university kind of runs in my family because had a couple cousins that went there, had a couple, I think my dad went to Rutgers, and then uncle went to Rutgers as well. So it's just one of those things where, ultimately it's like Rutgers runs in the family, much like U of I does since we've moved to the Midwest. But okay, the big thing I think really to keep in mind here, though, with Kyle Monangai is that his performance to me is kind of what you'd have expected out of a 7th round running back. Now, I'm not saying that not saying Sunday's performance was him being a stud by any means, but I also look at him and I think that you really look at Monangai, and one of the things you have to say is it's just like you kind of got what you paid for with him, right? Like we thought that the Bears were going to go into this draft and take a running back, and this running back was going to help this offense take the next step. They didn't take one till, their very final draft pick. So again, what you get is you get what you pay for is basically what it is. Does this mean, and I want to provide some clarification to your statement as well, does this mean that we think Monangai is going to suck? No. I think that it was just really sort of rough for him in this first outing because, again, he's got 3rd and 4th string guys blocking for him. I think if the run blocking gets a little bit better for him up front, then you're going to be in a situation where we're going from, it really sucked to all of a sudden, okay, this looks pretty good. The Bears have something cooking with Kyle Monangai. But he is also the type of player where, I had him on my watch list going into this week, and I'm like, let's see what he can do because there's no word on Roschon Johnson yet. And so you want to see if Monangai's able to step up and go from basically being running back 4 is what the Bears had him listed as, to running back 2, hopefully, which the Bears have Travis Homer listed as running back 3, but Travis Homer's not going to be running back 3, and I can tell you guys that much right now.
Yeah, I think your point to the offensive line is definitely valid. The Bears as a whole did not run block particularly well in this game. Now they were playing without 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line, obviously because they were sitting because they're starters. So it's to be expected a little bit, but I think it is a little concerning. Just not so much because I watched every single guy on the offensive line, and not so much individual performances. I don't think anyone was really that bad, but as a team, I thought their run blocking was not very good, not really opening a lot of holes. So yeah, hopefully when the starters get into the game, we see a little bit better performance in the run game. But kind of on the positive side, I have 2 guys that I kind of want to like shout out because I thought they played pretty well. On the offensive side, I thought Theo Benedict was their best offensive lineman in this game, which is really, really surprising to see based on kind of where he was last year. Obviously, he got injured pretty early on in the preseason, so we didn't see a whole lot of him. But this is a guy from British Columbia, Canada, who doesn't have a lot of football experience, but I thought he played really, really well, especially as a pass blocker in this game. His hand placement his hands still land way too wide. But I thought his kick slide is really good. When I talked about earlier about Usayd Pillow not playing with good knee bend and not playing with a good base, that is not the case with Benedict. Benedict was playing really low and his feet looked really good. He was handling speed. He went up against Chop Robinson, the Dolphins' first round pick from 2024, a couple times and shut him down. It was only 2 reps now, but it did look pretty good there. So I want to shout out him. I thought he played really well. And then on the defensive side of the ball, obviously Austin Booker was the star of the show, but I thought Dominic Robinson played really well as well, which is important because Dominic Robinson, when he was drafted, was a raw player, and it was always going to take 3, maybe 4 years before you get an impact from him. I'm not going to say he's going to be a game changer defensive lineman, but I think he's shown enough to at least get into the rotation and make the team. First of all, he just looks way bigger than he did last year. Like he's much bigger than Austin Booker. He's probably easily 260, 265 at this point, which is really good to see because he was a wide receiver when he started in college. So he's probably put on easily, 50, 60 pounds of muscle in 5 years or whatever it's been. But he had a sack on a really nice rep. He had a spin move pressure on another, which actually resulted in a sack by, I believe it was Zach Pickens, but it was only because the quarterback ran right into him. It wasn't anything Zach Pickens did, but it resulted in a sack. He showed really good bend on a couple plays, which is not really something you expect from a guy who's as big as he is. So I think he should be on the roster, when it's all said and done based on what I've seen. I know he's been disappointed the last 2 years, but I think you got to be a little bit patient with him. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar or even, going to be an important factor, but I think you could do a lot worse as a fourth, fifth D end.
Yeah, see, Robinson's interesting because he was obviously drafted when he was, first off, I think the Bears' first draft class, and I think he was Ryan Pohl's first, 5th round draft pick or something. But the story's interesting because you're talking about a guy that was 6'5", so he was playing quarterback / receiver in high school, then goes to Miami of Ohio and gets recruited to play receiver. Doesn't really work out there because guys just move so differently at the college level, and if you're big doesn't necessarily mean that you are a good player. And then the second thing is this, is that he's at Miami of Ohio and ends up as a pass rusher, right? Which they converted him to a defensive end his last year. So you're talking about a player that, even though this is his 4th NFL season, he's still learning to play that pass rush position. But again, for depth's sake, you kind of hope that he's able to develop into something. And the reason being is because it's just Austin Booker's showing some potential. Austin Booker, I don't think people realize when he was at Kansas, I believe it was, he had 8.5 sacks, so pretty solid stuff there. But you need those 2 guys to eventually step up as well. And the reason being is because it's this team, unfortunately, can't trot out Montez Sweat and Dayo Odeyingbo on every single rep. They're going to need some of these situational pass rushers to step up. The UDFA pass rushers, I think it's interesting because it's just we really haven't seen some of these guys step up too much. Like power echoes bring speed to the table, but I don't really see him being a guy that is gonna go ahead and significantly step up. They signed what's his name? Kasimba. I can't say that name properly, but again, he's a veteran. He's only got so much left in the tank, so they need Booker and Dom Rob to step up.
Yeah, and I think so far it's this for this preseason for both of them. It's been pretty promising. I think they also kind of give you something a little bit differently because I think Robinson's bigger. I think he can hold up against the run a little bit. I don't know if Austin Booker's that's ever going to be really his strength. He wins more with quickness. Interestingly, when I was watching, I really wanted to see a rep where the Dolphins ran right at Austin Booker because when Austin Booker got into the games last year in the regular season, that's kind of what teams did is they ran right at him. And he didn't always hold up, but that was, he's a 200 at that point. He was a 240-pound rookie, day 3 pick. Like you don't really expect him to do much, but I wanted to see if they tested him. They didn't test him. They did test Dominic Robinson on the other side, and he stood up pretty well against the run there. So I think that's something he gives you. And then anything he kind of gives you as a pass rusher, like I said, he had a sack and another really good pressure. I think is bonus. So I think I'm actually much more confident about the Bears' rotation of defensive ends now than I was maybe even just a few weeks ago, because I think Booker and Robinson have both kind of taken that next step. And like you said, Montez Sweat and Deo are going to be the starters. We need to see big things out of them, but you really need to have 4, maybe even 5 pass rushers. A couple guys coming off the bench. I think the Bears might have 2 of them.
Yeah. Just saying here, you guys are, when college football hits and another 2, next weekend, okay, you guys are going to be pretty surprised at who my first pick for the Bears is, because at this point in the year, it's not looking like he's going to be on the board when the Bears pick at 32nd overall, all right, in the 2026 draft. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and get out of this thing, all right? We've kind of hit that 30-minute limit. Before we get out of here, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the show. Go ahead, guys, and drop a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure that you are interacting with Steve and I on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Usayd Koshul. Be sure to go ahead and check out the Halas Beat Twitter account as well at Halas Beat. We'll be back Thursday, guys, with another really good episode. Until then, guys, go ahead, bear down, enjoy your week. Hope it's going well so far, and you guys will hear from us later.